Hey guys, welcome to the Arena Meta Analysis for the Whispers of the Old God. We are continuing what we talked about before. It's been something like a week and a half since the last time we made one of these videos. It is Wednesday night when I'm recording this, April 6th. April 6th. So any cards revealed after this will not be in this video. And but we have enough cards now that we can kind of dig a little deeper into how the meta is going to shape out. And again, as usual, I'll have some of my game design analysis and critiques for the Hearthstone arena. But more, I'm just excited to talk about these cards because we got some definitely hugely impactful cards in this latest bunch when it comes to the arena. And we're going to just start off with a wonderful topic. I want to have this topic every time I make a video. It is called Warrior Good. Not because the warrior is good, but because the warrior is getting new good cards. The one that the warrior got is called the Ravaging Ghoul. And the Ravaging Ghoul is a common warrior card, which we have already seen one common warrior card so far, and it's N'Zoth's first mate, and it was amazing. We talked about it. But now we're getting the second warrior common. I think there's going to be about like 5 per class, is what TGT had. But anyway, it means that this is going to be showing up everywhere. It's going to have the offering bonus. It's a common. Warrior commons are pretty crappy in general. So you're going to be picking this a lot. It is a 3 mana 3/3 with a battle cry that says deal 1 damage to all other minions. So it is like a mini Dread Inferno. That's not a demon. You can't do demon stuff with it. And it's a 3/3, not a 6/6. 6 mana 6/6, much better than a 3 mana 3/3. But it does fit one of the, or it reinforces one of the needs for the warrior, which is 3 drops, which is very good. Because the monkey, which is our new favorite 3-drop, of course, is going to get its 50% offering rate reduced. So this card will hopefully come in, fill in the gap, and you won't feel that much of a pinch when it comes to getting your 3-drops as a warrior, which is very important, right? Like, it's very important to curve out as the warrior, and 3-drop was a big deal before the Fierce Monkey. So this is a good way to address that. It trades evenly with a 3/4 if it comes out on the board after the 3/4. It obviously trades down before. If the mage or the rogue or someone is trying to do something sneaky with the hero power of your 2/3 to your opponent's 2/3, this helps you get a free hit in. It trades evenly with a Scarlet Crusader. It trades evenly with a Harvest Golem. Just a lot of good things going on for it as a 3-drop. Now, is it a premium 3-drop? No, it's not a premium 3-drop. It still dies half the time to a 3/4 when it comes out afterwards. So I'm not too excited about it for a 3-drop. But the implications of being able to deal a ping as a non-ping class is so huge, right? Like, that's why Dread Inferno is so good, and that's why this card is going to be so good. So it fits in as a 3-drop, and it's better as a 3-drop generally. Than a regular 3/3. Better enough that you'll probably pick this over a regular 2-drop, for example. And also, just in case you're thinking, oh, but it could also hurt my own minions. You're not going to have a minion on the board as the warrior with only 1 health. That never happens, because when do minions happen with 1 health? It's when a 2/3 hits another 2/3 and a ping happens. Or like really weird situations. Like your 2/3 ate your opponent's 2/2, right? And if things like that happen, you don't really care too much about losing it because you're already ahead on the board. What's the real problem is when you're behind on the board for the warrior, and this still addresses it. So generally speaking, it's a good card, and later in the game, the fact that it pings, and it pings everything, so you can get just favorable trades all around, is insanely good. And of course, as we all know, for the warrior, dealing 1 damage to your own minions is not even the worst thing in the world, because there's plenty of like enrage mechanics, there's battle rage, there's a rampage, and all this other good stuff. So this is once you combine that like okay-ish 3-drop, like better than your bad 3-drops, not a premium 3-drop, mid-range 3-drop, with the kind of an amazing late game card for being a 3-drop also, you get a pretty good score overall. This is definitely a card that people will be picking or should be picking very highly, and that's good. It's no Nazatha's first mate, but you put this next to Nazatha's first mate, and you have a 1 mana card and a 3 mana card, and they're both common. One is ridiculously amazing, one is still a, I would say, near premium card. This is like, I take this over like a Yeti as the warrior, definitely. And that's pretty good, right? That's definitely something the warrior has been lacking before. So very happy with this. The next card I'm going to talk about is a card that we should have talked about last time, actually, but I just forgot. I didn't forget it because I was like disgusted with the card or something. I know a lot of people have very strong and very diverse opinions on this card. Like, some people think it's great, some people think it's awful, some people think it's okay. It is Tentacle for Arms, 5 mana, 2/2 weapon, Death Rattle, return this to your hand. There's pretty much no way to get rid of this card from the warrior, which means in the late game, this gives the warrior 2 damage per turn. You don't even have to use your hero power. You probably should. But that's pretty good. It does repeatedly cost 5 mana, which is kind of crappy. But as the warrior, if you're in a top deck situation, you're probably not using your mana every turn. You're not like hurting too much to like have to use your hero power every turn to get value. So you could probably squeeze this in one of the turns that you get like a 3-drop or a 2-drop, and that gives you 2 more damage every turn. Which means your hero power, or if you count this as a hero power, the way you kind of count Explorer's Hat, for example, as a hero power, you get double that. And when it comes to the late game, card advantage is all that matters. No one cares about tempo because you're top decking. So it is a really good top deck card for the warrior, like a really good one. Before that, it's unplayable. So you kind of have to balance the unplayable before your top decking-ness of this card and the fact that it is quite possibly the best top deck you can have as a warrior of any of the warrior cards. Would you take a Gorehowl over this? Yes. Okay, you take a Gorehowl. Would you take a Arcanite Reaper? I don't know. If you're top decking, I think I'd rather have Tentacle for Arms. And keep in mind, your opponent will be top decking too, most likely when you get there. So they'll actually be forced to drop some like 2-drops, right? Like 3/2s or whatever. This gets very useful. Like, I'm one of those people that I think this is going to be okay. It's going to be playable. You're not going to like avoid it like it's the worst card ever, right? Like, it's no boaster. And there will be games in which you lose to it and you're like, ugh. And it's also, at the very least, right, 2 damage of reach. And warrior can always use a little more reach. It's just a lot of like marginally good things going for it. I wouldn't take it over another card that is actually like good or like fills a curve or anything by any means. But if you're kind of forced to take this card, you have a lot worse options as the warrior. So this fits in with an aggro mindset if you run out of cards, right? Because you need to get to the top deck situation. And it fits in with a more control mindset because you'll have an infinite card advantage guaranteed by this card. So if you don't have a lot of weapons and you're playing a control style, consideration, or if you're just playing an aggro style and you need a little more reach at the end, consideration. It's pretty well valued. Like, I don't think this should be 4 mana. This 5 mana is pretty well valued. So that's it for the warrior cards. Oh no, that's not it for the warrior cards. We have one more warrior. I just stuck it in the next category. Because the next category is about card draw. Okay. I'm going to talk a little bit about card draw in general before we focus in on the warrior class card that's kind of sparking this conversation right here. And the warrior card is Blood Warriors. It is a epic card, 3 mana, that says add a copy of each damage-friendly minion to your hand. So it's like Echo of Medivh, but for warriors with like the warrior flavor. And I'll get into that specifically later. For now, let's look at card draw in general on a class basis, right? Because we're in the warrior right now. Warrior has Battle Rage. It's had it since Classic. It's a common card. Warrior always had the ability to kind of like surprise you and all of a sudden be up a whole crap load of cards on you and you lose, right? Like, you just start trading one-on-one. It doesn't matter if your hero power gets you like small amounts of card advantage here or there because the warrior has 2 extra cards on you because he just played a 2 mana card that drew like 3-4 cards. It's kind of insane, right? The warriors can draw cards without really losing that much tempo. It's like the Cult Master thing. And there's nothing really you can do about it because the warriors' minions are injured, right? You don't have to like present targets for trading on the board or anything like that. It's incredibly powerful. Dilution happened. That card didn't get any cards similar to it, really, for the warrior, and more than twice the amount of cards that existed in Classic are available now, that kind of guarantee in a Warrior draft kind of went away, right? You used to average, on average, see like that card more than once, like almost twice, I think, back in Classic. You really don't anymore. So the kind of card advantage Warrior style, where you're just on the board, you're grinding it out, and then in the end you win because you have more stuff than your opponent. And obviously your opponent can't deal lethal to you because you can keep using your hero power if you need to. It doesn't do so well these days. Obsidian Destroyer kind of helped bring it back a bit. Blood Warriors is going to help with that as well. But Warrior is not the only class that has card draw. The other classes with original card draw are Mage, Rogue, and Priest, right? Mage with Arcane Intellect, this is common class cards, which you see way more often than anything else. Rogue with Sprint, which is a huge one, and Priest with both Thought Steal and Acolyte, Norshar Cleric. So those are the cards, those are the classes that you can have pretty high consistency in the arena to be able to draw cards to victory if you need to in the draft. Rogue got Burgle and some other stuff to keep the card drawing thing alive. Priest kind of doesn't quite have the same card draw it used to have, but it started off so freaking high that it's still definitely a class that can draw its way to victory if it doesn't die. And Mage got a couple of like little boosts here and there, but generally it's also like degraded a little, but still it's still keeping up. Warrior was the one most in need of help, so Blood Warriors kind of fills that gap. And just to go a little deeper into it, Shaman and Paladin both got card draw cards to join the other classes I was talking about. And Druid has still not gotten a common class card that draws it cards. It's still kind of in the ramping phase when it comes to common cards. It's always had, of course, Ancient of Lore, and it's always had Nourish. And you see how great that those can be in a constructed environment. It's just not very uncommonly seen in the arena, especially now, right? When all that's gotten diluted and the Druid hasn't gotten anything kind of to replace it. So the Druid's actually dropping from like sort of having it before. And the Hunter had Starving Buzzard to start, which was not just a combo card with Unleash the Hounds, which you used to see like 2 or 3 copies per deck before the dilution effect, and back when it was even better than it is now. But also, Starving Buzzard obviously got nerfed. Starving Buzzard used to be 3 mana, I think. No, it used to be 2 mana, a 2 mana 2/1. It was just some ridiculous low cost that you could combo out everything with. So that used to be a kind of a Hunter playstyle, where you would like combo your way to victory by just drawing more cards than your opponent, even though Hunter is more hero power oriented and more deal face damage oriented. And it was kind of cool to see in the arena, a bit frustrating to play against, but that's just completely gone, and it's not really been replaced with anything. Just like Infest, like Ball of Spiders, all high rarity, kind of clunky-ish cards. So those are the 2 classes that actually can't draw their way to victory. That's not one of the win conditions for these classes. And drawing cards to victory is fairly standard, I think, when it comes to a card game. So I wouldn't really mind it if all the classes got it. And so right now, Hunter's kind of the one totally like shut out. And Druid, I think Blizzard's going to give Druid a card draw card this expansion, because are they really going to just let Druid be like one of the classes that started with card draw be kind of left out? I don't know. A Warlock obviously doesn't need card draw. I'm not even counting its card draw. It has a hero power. So anyway, that's the card draw overview. And Blood Warriors, just kind of my lead up. It was a little long and winding, but it was kind of my lead up to why Blood Warriors is such a good card. It is an epic, you're not going to see it that much, but I really like the fact that it's in the Warrior now, because it creates a diversity of playstyles. And you know the way we draft. We start at the center and we go where the deck takes us. So I like the deck to be able to take us to different places. And short of upping the offering rate of Battle Rage, adding new cards is the way to go. I hoped that this would be like a rare instead of a epic, but along with Echo of Medivh, I can see why this is an epic. As for how good it is, it's 1 mana less than Echo of Medivh, and your minions have to be damaged, so less good. because Echo of Medivh, you can just like drop a minion and copy it and get an extra card in your hand for 1 extra mana, like almost guaranteed whenever you use it. You can probably drop 2 minions, so you get 2 more cards for 1 extra mana. Blood Warriors, the cards you drop are probably not going to be damaged, so it's definitely significantly worse than Echo of Medivh. Now, you don't have to anti-tempo yourself as much, but that doesn't really make up for it. So if you're using Echo of Medivh as a baseline, it's just not as good at it as it, but still the type of card, right? It gives Warrior another dimension. Speaking of the Mage, and that the Mage hadn't gotten a lot of good card draw cards, Kabbalah's Tome is a new card that's going to be introduced, also an epic, and it's going to put Mage right back on the map as one of the most card drawing classes, just the way Classic has intended. So a lot of what I see here when it comes to this expansion, Whispers of the Old Gods, is, and I think constructed players notice it more because they're like just like replacing old cards, right? Like Standard is coming in, they're taking out some of the wild, crazy stuff in GVG, and they're just kind of stabilizing everything. And they're doing the same thing in the arena, kind of as in connection with Constructed, because these are cards that all kind of speak to the identity of these classes and strengthen their identity relative to where they were back in Classic. So Blizzard's kind of going back to its roots with the old gods. And it's a nice stabilizing influence on the arena. And next week, actually, we'll release a video series where I go a lot deeper into how Whispers of the Old God looks like it's going back to the roots. And in the arena, you'll see it. I think you'll feel Whispers of the Old God will feel a lot like Classic for the people who have played arena and Classic. And if you haven't, now you get to experience it with a bit more diversity and fun. Anyway, Kabbalah's Tome is 5 mana, add 3 random mage spells in your hand, like Nourish, but you don't have the option to ramp out. And I know people make fun of Nourish and the ramping out option, but I kid you not, I use the ramp option when I play Nourish like 1 out of every 6 or 7 games. It's like legitimately helpful to me. And it's the right play. Like, I don't do it for like kicks, right? Or to like BM. I mean, sometimes. Kabbalah's Tome, though, is not as good. It's obviously not as good because you're adding 3 random mage spells. And a random mage spell is less good than a card in your deck. Because, like you probably found out from the Discover mechanic, a card in your deck is already pre-selected out of 3 cards. So adding a random card, while mage spells are generally better than the random cards you're going to be offered in the arena, it's not as good as being able to select out of 3 of them. And unlike Discover, you don't get to select out of 3 and then pick the best one for the situation. So Discover is even like 1 level above that. This is like the base level of what cards you get. So not very good. But it's card draw, right? Like, should it be 5 mana? Probably not. I would give a discount on this. I'd probably only make this 4 mana. Arcane Intellect is what? We rated as 60 right now? Like, definitely worse. Like, significantly worse. Okay, so moving on, kind of the counter to what I was calling Warrior Good is Paladin Bad, which is just as important. Because if Blizzard just releases a bunch of great cards for every class, that doesn't really change the balance. All things are relative. For there to be winners, there needs to be losers. And so far, in this expansion, the Paladin is losing. And I like that, because the Paladin has kind of won every single expansion up to this point. Except for BRM, which the Warlock won. But BRM aside, the Paladin has won almost every expansion up to this point. Okay, fine. LE, the Warrior, won. But it's been like top 3 in every expansion. Now, the new card that was revealed for the Paladin is Steward of Darkness. Nope, I'm wrong. Steward of Darkshire, Stand with Darkness. Steward of Darkshire, Stand with Darkness. And you'll hear them talked about a lot, because that's going to be a combo. Steward of Darkness is a 3 mana 3/3, which you may be thinking, hey, Paladins don't really have 3-drops. That could be good, sort of. It's a 3 mana 3/3 rare Paladin card, and its ability is whenever you summon a 1 health minion, summon including using the hero power, including things like Razorfen Hunter, give it Divine Shield. So it looks like it's super powerful on its face. Like, super powerful, because giving something a Divine Shield usually costs like a card and a mana, right? Like, and the other thing that gives a minion Divine Shield is Argent Protector, which is an amazing card. This is kind of Argent Protector statted, sort of. But rather than being able to pick the minion you give the Divine Shield to, you have to then summon a minion with 1 health, or use your hero power. What's a card similar to it? Silverhand Regent, right? Silverhand Regent, you hero power, you get 2/1/1s, which is better than 1 Argent Squire. 2/1/1s are better than 1 Argent Squire, because you can deal 2 damage the very next turn. Whereas 1 Argent Squire, you can only deal 1 damage, and they both take 2 hits to kill. The only difference is they can get mass removed more easily, but it's the arena, there's not that many mass removals. So it's a little bit subpar compared to a Silverhand Regent, and it kind of makes up for it because you could have other 1 health minions. Like, you've seen Hobgoblin, right? Like, you don't have that many, like, 1 attack or 1 health minions, probably, in your average draft. You have, like, 1 of them, 2 of them, at most 3 of them, but probably just 1 or 2. And then to have it kind of come out at the same time as this card, it would be on a much later turn. And then those 1 health minions, even if they do get a Divine Shield, it's like not the end of the world, right? Those 1 health minions are probably 2/1s or 1/1s. It's around the same, I'd say, as a Silverhand Regent. And so that's not that good. I mean, so don't get me wrong, it's still a good card. Like, I take it over a 2-drop, but it's just not insanely good. And every time I see a card that the Paladin has that's not insanely good, like Stand for Darkness, which, see, huge combo, I get very happy. Because as long as the Paladin keeps getting not insane cards, their power level will drastically lower. Because the cards they have been getting all have had offering bonuses, and they've been so consistently getting them, and they're still only the 3rd best class in the arena. So once you start taking that away from the Paladin, they will be balanced. You don't need to totally screw the Paladin over with a bunch of like Ogre Warmauls and like Warbots and like Boasters in order to drop the Paladin down. The Paladin was never that powerful. So to put him more to the center, you just need a bunch of these cards. So very happy with that. And then you also have the Vilefin Inquisitor, which is kind of more like a constructed card and more of a fun card. It's an epic card. It's a 1-mana 1/3 with a battle cry that says your hero power becomes summon a 1/1 Murloc. And it is a Murloc, and it is for Murloc decks. And you won't get all that much use out of it as the Paladin. You do have Murloc Knight, so it's technically better than a generic 1/3, but not by that much. So one thing to know, though, is that generic 1/3s are not actually all that bad in the arena. They kill all the 1-drops, right? And they trade up against all the other 1-drops. You know, Argent Squire, well, like, besides, like, Zombie Chow. Like, Argent Squires destroyed, 2/1s destroyed. They kill, like, Living Roots. Just your typically good 1-drops, they'll kill. Even if your opponent plays a weird 1/2 or something, they'll still trade with it well. They get rid of Divine Shields, you know, for minions that have them, like they can shield a mini-bot, like they do stuff. And late in the game, you can clean up like 1/1s on the board or something with it, and they can still be useful. So 1/3s are not the worst thing in the world. Definitely not as good as a 2-drop or anything, but it's not like a card you'll never see. I mean, it's an epic, it's a card you'll rarely see, but it's bad, but not like awful. So now we're getting to our super good cards. So we've talked about some of these cards so far, and they've been like on the general scale of usability, like centered, right? Like they're bad, but not that bad. You know, they're good, but not that good. Ravaging Ghoul was as close to like a premium card as we got, right? It's like, I think it's about Yeti level, maybe like a tiny bit about Yeti. But now we're gonna get to the great cards. And the great cards will start with the card revealed just earlier today. It is a Hunter card, which is great because Hunters need more good cards. But it's an epic, so the Hunter won't see it very often. The card is called Call of the Wild, and it is a 8-mana epic spell that summons all 3 animal companions. So, first of all, 3 animal companions plus 3 cards, like you have to use up 3 cards, and each card themselves has a value, would be 9 mana. So this is already starting out 1 mana less and 2 cards less than its cost. Now on top of that, there's no RNG. No RNG whatsoever because you're guaranteed to get all 3. And third, they even synergize with each other, right? Misha protects your Leok that's buffing everything. your Huffer is already buffed by the Leok, so it's actually a 5/2 charge, and it can remove any threat in the game. So you're spending 8 mana, but you're getting initiative. And 5 is a pretty good number when it comes to initiative. And it's also reach for 5 damage. So, like, no matter what your playstyle, no matter what kind of hunter you're making in the arena, like, this is good. This is good for you. It's kind of an instant pick. I can't imagine any situation or where any other card... I can't imagine a deck in which you would pick any other epic card over this one. Because it is just good for all types of decks. And that means it's overpowered. So yes, this is a very overpowered card. You look at where Kraken is. Kraken's a 9/7 body with 4 damage. This is, first of all, 5 damage. It's 1 mana less. It gives you beasts, which are important as the hunter, and it buffs your board to the extent you have anything on the board. And it taunts on top of that to protect your thing that buffs the thing. Like, it's just really good, okay? So, flat out overpowered. It's about time Hunter gets another one of these cards. Savannah Highmane was the one before that. So next, in the power creep bucket, we have Thing from Below. And this is going to start the power creep bucket, also known as the Shaman. Because Shaman are going to get 3 of these cards. Now, I want to start this kind of like Shaman section with the power creep. But I also want to note that none of these are common cards. So at least in the arena, like on a card-to-card basis, they're probably power creep. But in the arena, they're not going to increase the power of the Shaman by that much. The Thing from Below is a 6 mana 5/5 taunt, which sounds like it's a horrible stat thing. But its ability is that it costs 1 less for each totem you've summoned this game. What it does is, let's just make a comparison first. Frost Giant is a 10 mana 8/8, and it gets reduced by 1 mana whenever you use your hero power in the game, no matter where the Frost Giant is. So, in order to get 8/8, which should be like, what, 7.5 mana, you need to use your hero power 2.5 times. In order to get Thing from Below's value, which should be about 5 mana, it's a good 5 mana card too, you need to hero power once. Get a totem sometime. And then it's Frost Giant levels. And you know what? You don't even need to summon you don't even need to use your hero power. You can also just play a totem. You have plenty of good totems. Generally, a Shaman deck will have a few totems in it. You know, Totem Golem, Tuskar Totemic, Flame Tongue Totem, Mana Tide, right? Like, totems are a thing. So, it's gonna come out sometime in like the mid or late game where you're gonna top deck it at some point, and it's gonna cost like 2 mana. Like at most. And it's going to be a 5/5 taunt. So it's flat out overpowered. Now, I don't think it's as broken as people think, though, in the arena. Even though, yes, you are going to be toteming somewhat. And even though, yes, it is, by its stats, really, really overpowered. I don't think it's that good. And we're splitting hairs here, right? Like, this is going to be more than an 80. It's maybe going to be a 90 or more than a 90. I'm just saying it's not like muster for battle levels of broken. And that's because each time you totem, you're actually kind of losing tempo, right? Because totems are O2s and they don't do anything. You lose tempo whenever you totem. So you're really just banking tempo. This is like a reverse overload, where you bank some of that tempo that you use every time you totem, and you get it back later in the form of the Thing from Below. And that's really interesting because it's kind of a Shaman mechanic, which is nice because Shamans overload. So now Shamans are have these like different mechanics where they're playing with the mana in both ways. And that makes it a very like flexible and interesting and flavorful kind of take on Shaman. So I really like that. And also it uses totems, and I really like that because in using totems, Shamans use totems, right? Like all of my successful Shaman decks in LoE have used totems, and TGT for that matter. They've been decks where you spread the board wide and then you get value. It could be a Thunderbuff Valiant, which is amazing. It can be Flame Tongue Totems, but you're somehow trying to get value from the fact that your hero power puts stuff on the board that no one can ping away. And this does that, right? It supports the whole totem strategy, so that's always very good. On top of that, what's one of the unique things about the Shaman that no other class besides the Rogue can do, and the Rogue does it in a little bit of a different way, is that it can flip the board. Like one turn in the late or mid game, it can do a whole lot of stuff, clear your board, and establish its own board on the same turn. So this allows you to, instead of overloading for the next turn, to have like basically strategically or get some value out of losing the board slowly by toteming in order to get the tempo back later. So it fits in with the board flip mentality that shamans have. And that's a really cool thing. And so I really like that. So I really like this card, even though it is a power creep. It is flat out overpowered. Shaman also has this history, right, of getting really, really insanely good cards and it still not being a good class, like Hex, Fire Elemental, Fireguard Destroyer, Totem Golem, which was thought to be way more broken than it actually is. I think everyone realizes now that Totem Golem is good but not broken. At the time, I think most people thought Totem Golem was like amazing, and I was one of the few people that thought it was like very limited. And I've kind of come around to it. Like I think I bumped it up like 8 points since where I initially valued it, but it's definitely way lower than where other people were valuing it. And it's kind of the same deal, right? Like you can get these cards for the Shaman, but somehow its hero power, like the Warrior's hero power, it's just like a combo. It's much more of a combo hero power than it is anything else. So Blizzard making it a totem thing is a very good arena take. Even if they don't do it for the arena, it has very good effects on the arena. And moving on from the power creep theme, not really moving on, this is also pretty power creepy, is the Hammer of Twilight, another Shaman card. It is a epic, and it is a weapon. Always good to see more weapons come to these like low weapon classes. And it is a 5 mana 4/2 weapon. You're thinking, all right, weapons should be 4/2 weapons should be 4 mana. What does this have? It has Death Rattle, summon a 4/2 elemental. So you use 1 more mana the turn before, and the turn after that you get a 4/2, which is worth 2 mana, 2.5 mana. So very good use of mana. And in any case, 4/2 is a pretty good weapon, right? Like you know how good True Silver and Death Spite are. A lot of people are saying this is an absolutely amazing card. I'm going to disagree, and I'm going to say it's just a good card. Okay, it's a very good card, but it's not a like 100 level good card or anything like that, right? Because summon a 4/2 elemental, it is good, but you're summoning a 4/2 late in the game, and late in the game it doesn't quite deserve the amount of mana that it gets, right? You're all so late in the game, you're like 2 drops and 3 drops and whatever, that is all kind of like worth less. And more importantly than that, you're not playing it on curve. So people kind of don't think of weapons as being played on curve. They think of drops as being played on curve. But weapons are kind of like drops. You can play it and then leave it there, first of all, essentially on the board as a drop. But removals also kind of correspond to the amount of defense your opponent will usually have, the amount of the health of the minion your opponent usually drops. Like, a 2 mana removal is 3 damage. Why? Because you can have a 2/3. A 3 mana removal is 4 damage. Why? Because you can have a 3/4. A 4 mana removal is for some reason 6 damage, because mage. But at 5 mana, at 4 mana, like at a bare minimum, you want 4 damage. Because that, in theory, finishes off half the minions. Like 5/4s, 4/4s, that kind of stuff. But it's at least doable. It's sort of on curve, right? It's like playing a 5/4 on curve. You don't really like it, but it'll do. So the weapons that are on curve, like Arcanite Reaper, like Death Bite or whatever, and the reason Death Bite is so powerful is because it stays on curve the next turn, right? Because you get 5 damage when you hit the next thing. Hammer of Twilight is not on curve, and weapons that are not on curve are not good. Like, think of Assassin's Blade. It's a 5 mana, 3 damage, the 1 damage lower than this, but it has 4 charges. It's not that good. So you're getting a lot of total damage out over the course of several turns, but the very fact that you anti-tempo yourself so much on that turn really, really hurts you. And the Hammer of Twilight does the same thing. So, you know, Assassin's Blade is not good. True Silver is kind of amazing. This, in terms of just how much you get for 5 mana, is even more amazing than that. You kind of find a happy medium in the middle. So, good, maybe even great, but definitely not a super premium card. The fact that it does not play on curve hurts it way more than I think people think. So, To continue the theme of playing on curve and just how important playing on curve is, we're going to look again, or we're going to continue with the Shaman and look at the other card that is just seems like flat out overpowered power creep, right? It is the Master of Evolution. It's a 4 mana, 4/5, so you know it's got to be good. And it is a rare, so not an epic. This card is actually going to be seen like Thing from Below, right? 2 rares, both Shaman cards, and both really good. And so this one is Battlecry, transform a friendly minion into a random one that costs 1 more. So it's like a recombobulator, but it recombobulates it into like a better minion. Recombobulator, you'll see that we don't have rated terribly high. Like, we started it out really high because we're like, oh my god, it basically heals a minion. And then we're like, not really. It kind of just makes a minion worse. There's so many like minions with battle cries or like other abilities or like whatever that's just understated. So you can't act. It has a bit of that like youthful brewmaster effect where you can't really play it whenever you want to. And so it's pretty bad for tempo, actually. Now, Master for Evolution doesn't suffer from that. You're happy transforming almost any minion you put on the board, much less a minion that had a battle cry or a minion that's injured, because you get it 1 mana higher. So, you know, definitely a power creep on something like a Yeti. It's a flat-out better deal. But because of this whole playing on curve thing and just how important it is for it to be a drop, this is not that broken. This is one of those cards where, like Fireguard Destroyer, you kind of look at it and you're like, well, overstated, over whatever, right? This is just going to be an amazing card. And in the end, you're like, all right, fine, this is a really good card. It's obviously better than a Yeti. So, you know, a decent amount better than a Yeti. But it's not like a broken card. It's not touching like Fire Elemental, right? It's not touching like Hex. And the reason it's not is because, one, this ability is not going to trigger a lot of times. When you play a 4/5 on curve, you kind of want to also trade into your opponent's 3-drop, so you're not going to use it on your 3-drop. Or, also likely, you don't even have a 3-drop because you're playing reactively. So something like half the time, when playing it on curve, maybe more than half the time when playing it on curve, your Master of Evolution is just a 4/5. Like, that's it. Now, playing it in the late game, you can obviously use its ability, but then how good are 4/5s in the late game? They're okay, right? They're not like, they don't suffer the same way a lot of smaller drops do, but they're not the amazingness that kind of justifies their position on the tier list, for example, that they are. So the Fireguard Destroyer is a 4 mana, I don't know, on average 5/6 or something, 5.5, 6, and it's overstated and it overloads, so you get the mana quicker, and that's why it's supposed to be really good. But between the RNG, which this card also has, and the fact that, like, what's a 7/6 doing for you on turn 6, right? Like, you're not hitting anything that's going to take 7 damage. The Fireguard Destroyer ended up just being good, like better than a Yeti, and not being insanely good. Master of Evolution is going to go through the same deal. Master of Evolution is going to be good. It's going to be better than a Yeti. It's even going to be better than a Fireguard Destroyer. But it's not going to touch the upper realms of goodness that we see class cards. So yes, there is this is a premium card. And as the Shaman, one of our 3 worst classes, right? Shaman, Hunter, Priest, it needed some help. It's a rare card. It's not going to get out of control. I think generally I would consider it vaguely balanced. And so I don't actually have that much of a problem with the design of this card. Like, it's not going to be a Keeper of Oldemon. It's not going to be a boogeyman in the arena. Which brings us to the last card we're going to review today, which is a Druid card. It's a Druid rare, and it is also going to fit into this theme of playing on curve that I'm talking about. So where the other 2 cards are all a little bit worse once you consider what happens when you play it on curve. And playing on curve, by the way, happens about like half the time for a 4-drop. For something like a 2-drop, it happens like less than half the time. So the way you think about it is, if you never see the card, right, in a game, it doesn't matter, right? It might as well not be in your deck. So of the % times that you draw on the card and need to play it, what % is it on curve and what % is it not on curve? So obviously, the smaller the mana, the more likely it is the less likely it is that you play on curve. It's kind of paradoxical, right? Because people keep thinking, oh, 2-drop is a curve card. Yes, but you actually play it much less on curve than something like a 4-drop or a 5-drop. Mire Keeper is a 4 mana 3/3 with 2 choose ones. One is summon a 2/2 slime, the other one is gain an empty mana crystal. You're probably going to summon a 2/2 slime instead of gaining an empty mana crystal, I think. But gaining an empty mana crystal is good too. So if you're really ahead, you summon the empty mana crystal and you kind of ramp yourself. The mana crystal, you may be thinking, well, Wild Growth is 2 mana. This is amazing. But Wild Growth ramps you on turn 2, right? You just get more mana. This is on turn 4. You start out at 6 the next turn. And it's an empty mana crystal. It's not a filled one like Keeper of the Grove or Nourish. So you don't get to use it this turn. So what it effectively is, for the most part, with some flexibility, is that it's going to be a Silverhand Knight. And you're thinking, well, Silverhand Knight is pretty good. It's like pretty much the best 5-drop, right? Why isn't Mire Keeper that good? Because from your tone, it sounds like you don't think this card is going to be that good. And the reason I don't think this card is going to be that good is the same reason I don't think Hammer of Twilight is going to be like one of the top premium cards of all time. And I don't think Master of Evolution is going to be that great either. It is because on curve. What happens when you play a Mire Keeper on curve as a 4? Well, if your opponent has any 3-drop, it kind of trades evenly with this, which is not what you want from a 4-drop. And if your opponent has a 4-drop, it still trades evenly with this, which is okay for another 4-drop. But where it really shines is that it starts trading more with 5-drops. The problem is, while a lot of 6-drops or things people play on turn 6 have a combined 6 health, or a 4/4 can eat something like a 2-drop or whatever, at 5-drops, only 5/5s have 5 health. There's a lot of like 4/6s coming out. There's 5/6s. You're generally not going to be able to get your even trade with a Mire Keeper. And you're also not going to be able to trade down. Because on turn 5, you have a much less likely chance of having your opponent play 2 cards than you do on turn 5. On turn 5, your opponent could play a 4 and a 2, which your 4/4 eats the 2-drop, and then, you basically get a 2-for-1 when you factor the whole thing in. Or your opponent plays 2 3-drops, which again, your 4/4 eats, and, all that good stuff. Or you could play 3 2-drops, right? Like, your opponent has options. The Mire Keeper, on the other hand, comes in, and if it's your opponent's turn 4, he's probably not going to play 2 2-drops. And to the extent that he plays 2 2-drops, they could be 2 3/2s, in which you would also not get any advantage. And if you play it to your opponent's turn 5, they could do a 3 and a 2. And if their 2 is a 3/2, once again, your Mire Keeper is not eating anything. It's just like kind of trading on its stats. So on turn 4, this card trades down evenly. It trades up evenly half the time, maybe. And that's it. Like, it trades evenly with other 4-drops. It, like, never is able to get you ahead. The reason Silverhand Knight is so good is because it avoids the, like, removal, the hard removal, which starting on turn 5 is starting to become a problem. Like, think Pit Fighter, right? Like, if your Pit Fighter gets hexed, you're not happy. If your 4/4 part of your Silverhand Knight gets hexed, you're kind of okay with it. With 4-drops, that's less likely the case, right? If your Yeti gets hexed, like, it's not the best deal in the world, but, like, you're okay with it generally. So it's not avoiding that. And on the other hand, it gets all the downsides. And it doesn't have the upside that your opponent is likely to want to play some small things that you can actually start getting 2-for-1s on. So it kind of has the worst of all worlds on turn 4. Now, late in the game, it's 5/5 worth of stats. That's pretty good. But on turn 4, it's actually a very, very weak card. And like I said, with a 4-drop, half the time you play it on turn 4. Late in the game, would you rather have this or a Yeti? I don't know. I think it's a toss-up. But on turn 4, you would definitely rather have a Yeti. You would almost never rather have this. It has some flexibility in that you can get the mana crystal to ramp out, if you have some curve considerations, like you only have big cards in your hand. I like the flavor, obviously. It's a choose one and it's a ramp. I'm all about that. But in terms of how good the card is for the Druid, it's not a good card for the Druid. You would kind of take it, like, in the middle-ish. And I don't know that anyone's saying this is a good card or anything like that. I'm just in case you were looking at it and trying to compare with Silverhand Knight, not a good comparison. Nowhere close to Silverhand Knight. So you may be wondering, where are the epic neutrals? We're not going to review them right now. We're going to review them next week, early next week. I want to say on Tuesday we're gonna have a video, hopefully, out for you guys. And by then, all the old gods will be released, and we'll also cover all the old gods, and we'll have a much better picture. Like, even by the time you're watching this, there's probably the last old god is probably released, and Blizzard seems to have something up their sleeve with this old god. So I didn't want to do any like wider meta analysis until I see him. So I went with some like, you know, individual like game design stuff like curve, like power creep, like card draw. But we're going to go deep into what the old god means and game design in the next video. For now, thank you guys for watching, and I want to give a huge shout out to our Patreons who are amazing and who supported us all this time on YouTube and on Twitch and everywhere else. They're here. Thank you guys so much. If you want to become a Patreon and if you want to feed the goat, click this link up here, and we thank you a lot for it. That's it from me. I will see you next week with the continuation of our card review. And I want to announce, we have decided, we have gotten everything together. We are going to do a 12-part, no less than 12 parts, each part being like a third this length probably, but 12-part final card review before Whispers of the Old God comes out, after the final batch of cards are released. And Merps is going to join us for that one. So that's going to be pretty sweet, and that's going to happen like right before the release, so we get everything kind of like out there, and it'll, you know, follow us and stay hyped about Whispers of the Old Gods. So thanks for watching, and see you guys next week.